Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is Tuesday morning, 8 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, November the 16th. I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. And we're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And we're going to continue talking about the impact of abuse on women, and that's from Dave Decker from angerresources.com, www.angerresources.com. And we sort of left off sort of halfway through yesterday. And, yeah, I'm glad to be here, glad to be able to do these shows. You know, I'm not a professional counselor or a therapist, and, you know, I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own shows, which I say on every show. But that's because it's important for people to know. And really, I'm just wanting to be one more voice out here for people, because I know there's so many survivors, and I know, you know, that there's so many people who are going through this stuff right now. And I just wanted to be one more voice of, you know, some sort of encouragement for people, and also just to talk about the whole issue surrounding abuse. You know, nobody, it's understandable that nobody wants to talk about it. You know, it's very disturbing, and it's like, but when it's your life and you've been forced to live it, then it's kind of like, why are we not talking about it? You know what I mean? Like, because society says, oh, it's too ugly, it's too hurtful, we don't want to know about it. Except unless it's a movie, right? We can watch a movie about it, but if it's real life, then it's too painful. And a lot of society just wants to ignore it and pretend it doesn't happen. Mainly, I think, because it's such a disgusting, uncomfortable topic, right? And a lot of us know exactly what it's all about. So sad enough. You know, I thought, no, I just want to be one more voice out there for people to know that, you know, there is hope and there is help. And I'm sitting on the other side of this now, 3.5 years ago, where I was really in a dark place, and I just wanted to be another voice of encouragement for people to hang on and keep reaching out and keep looking for that help where you can. You know, it's really ultimately up to us to get that help, whether we go to see a therapist, a counselor, group support, online group support, which I really like, because you can remain anonymous if you want to. And you can go on when you feel like it. You know, you don't have to leave your house, and if you have a computer, otherwise you might have to go to the library or a friend's or something. But it's just good to get some help, right? Get some support. So that's why I'm doing these shows. And so, you know, you have to listen at your own discretion, because all of my shows are very sensitive. You know, I talk about the whole issues surrounding abuse, and I don't, you know, I'm not minimizing it or sugarcoating it. And so, you know, my shows are very sensitive, so I would ask that everybody listen at your own discretion. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission from an adult, you know, someone who you trust and who cares about what you're doing and who cares about you, and that you would have them listen to the show with you, just to make sure that you should be listening to the show, just because of the, you know, there is adult content on my shows. And I just think anytime there's a chat room situation, that young people should be protected at all times and should know how to keep themselves protected, right? So if you're a young person under the age of 18 and you just haven't, you know, learned all the safety tips and whatnot on how to keep yourself safe online, just type into your browser internet safety for children or online safety, internet safety, and it will, you know, bring up websites that will tell you how to keep yourself safe when you're in a chat room situation and when you're online at any time, right? So just be very careful, because there are a lot of crazy people out there who would like to get a hold of children and hurt them. So I'm just telling you, you got to be very, very careful, right? So we'll get right into this topic here this morning. We're about halfway through this article now, and this is from Dave Decker and Michael Obsatz. They have a website, and it's called Anger Resources, www.angerresources.com, ANGERESOURCES, Anger Resources. And they both, you know, like therapists, counselors, they work with a lot of people who have, obviously they specialize in anger management and also domestic abuse, and they kind of touch a little bit on child abuse a little bit. So it is kind of interesting. It's a great website. There's lots and lots of good information for people who maybe, you know, you don't even have to be abused to get something out of this website. You know what I mean? There's stuff on here about road rage and how to handle our anger issues, because anger is normal and it's natural. And so, you know, stuffing it is no good, just so that we can be the nice person all the time. Stuffing it is absolutely very destructive. And also to be abusive because we're angry is also very wrong. But we can learn how to be assertive, right, without being abusive. Because we are going to get angry, and we actually do need to get angry sometimes, right? And so there's healthy ways to do it, where you're not hurting people, you're not hurting yourself, right? And that's the important thing, I think. So that's why I'm looking at this stuff. It's very important to me because I was very angry. And I'm still angry, but I'm not, I'm not destructive, right? That's the whole issue. I'm learning how to go ahead and allow myself to be angry without stuffing it or without hurting myself or without being abusive to other people. And I think, if everybody would do that, a lot of it, or maybe all abuse would be stopped, right? Because that's a lot of people take their garbage out on everybody around them, and a lot of times that's a lot of abuse sort of stems from that. And also, murders, people getting angry at somebody and then just kill them, right? I just think that if people would just get their anger under control and learn how to not hurt people and be assertive but just not hurt people, we could probably, there'd be this world would be at a better place, that's for sure. So we left off here about halfway through talking about, this is all sort of the impact of abuse on women. And they specifically wanted to touch on this because it's so important for people to know what happens to a woman when she is abused, you know what I mean? And it's absolutely horrific. So we were going through all the stuff, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, shame, defectiveness, inadequacy, incompetence, guilt and whatnot, frustration, anger, irritability, defensiveness, being edgy. And that's just, really anybody who's being abused can sort of take on this stuff. Exactly. It's like not just for women, but it's just that he wanted to show specifically for women because he tries to help men to not be abusers. So he works with men. He also works with families. He works with men, all people, right? Men, women, children. But he's wanted to be specific and talk about in this article, abuse, the impact of abuse on women, and I think that's awesome. The next one, we looked at appearing hysterical, out of control, irrational, being disrespectful and abusive herself toward the partner, children, or others, trying to hurt or kill herself or her partner. And that's kind of where we left off. Over-dependency on her partner, this is where we left off. Feeling stuck, trapped, powerless, helpless, hopeless. And an over-dependency on her partner, whoever her partner is. And that feeling of being stuck or trapped, powerless, helpless, hopeless. I know, my own mother was always talking about feeling trapped and powerless, and that she didn't really know who she was, like she had lost herself in that marriage, and she never knew who she was because she was abused as a child, went into this marriage and then was abused, in this abusive marriage with my dad, and then really felt very much helpless and very much hopeless, even though, she could have got out any day, any one of those days of those however many years of torture that they put each other through, she could have got out. She could have walked out the door and said, I've had enough of this. And but she didn't, and she stayed in it because she was so damaged. She was just so psychologically damaged. She needed to see, some professionals and to get some help, to see some domestic violence counselors and people who could help her, you know what I mean? Because she was right down at the bottom of the barrel. And she could still have fun. We'd go to people's homes. We would, that's why a lot of people have a hard time with my story, because the people that know my parents, right? Because my mom, when she was having a good time, she was happy, and she always looked for the good times. So if we went to somebody's house, she'd be like, okay, we're going over there, and we're going to have a good time, and no one is going to ruin this for me. You know what I mean? So we're all going to behave ourselves, and, sometimes the fights would break out at other people's homes, but generally it was just arguments, and she would be happy at these people's homes, and she would have a good time, and then we would get back in the car, and it would all go back to the way it was. And that is why a lot of people have a hard time believing that when people say, I've been abused, and this is my story, and whatever, there's always these people around that say, what? Because people are able to pull off, when they live their whole lives like this, quite often. Not sometimes, because some abusers can't do it, and they continually stay in this state of, their craziness, you know what I mean? And so people just say, oh, yeah, they are crazy, right? But unless somebody saw them doing something, like a lot of abusers are very much able to pull themselves out of their craziness, you know what I mean, their abusive behaviors, and act like perfectly normal people when they need to, right? And that was my parents. And I think a lot of abusers are like that. And my parents used to fight in the stores, and they used to, mainly in restaurants, they would start big, huge fights in restaurants, throwing food at each other and cursing at each other, sometimes getting up around the table and smacking each other. And then, people are looking and they're going, "Oh my God, this is going to be a fight here," And it did happen. But the thing is usually at someone's home, they would just go to have a good time. And then when we left the house, back to the same old garbage. So see, my mom, she could have got out at any time. She could have left. She could have asked any one of her friends for help. She did have a couple of friends. She had the courts on her side, really. I mean, they told them guys to get help, and she could have got out, right? But she had this whole feeling of that she was just stuck in this thing, right? And that was going to be it. And I think a lot of women end up that way, right? And a lot of people who have been abused end up like that, feeling like that. And actually, it's very, very sad because she could have left at any time, and so could have my dad, right? Paranoia says starting to make negative assumptions and interpretations about her partner's statements and behaviors due to their past history together. For example, the negative interpretations have often been a reality for her in the past, right? So paranoia, starting to make negative assumptions and interpretations about her partner's statements and behaviors due to their past history. Well, my parents were totally like that because they had this horrible past. Their marriage was not very good from the start. My mom was always telling me and telling the family, my older siblings, about some of the stuff that he had done to her and to the children when they were small, when they first were married, right? And some of the behaviors that my dad was exhibiting there just in the first 5 years of their marriage. And she would talk about this stuff, and I could kind of see why then, when they would, and when they, the abuse would just continue on 20 years later, you know what I mean? They would treat each other a certain way because they had, from the very beginning, been doing all kinds of hurtful things to each other. And then later on, as they grew older in this marriage, they had all this background stuff, and it was always this paranoid stuff, you know what I mean? Because my dad would say something and my mom would be like, "Well, you would kill us all," because my dad would be like, "I should just kill you all," and then my mom would be like, "Well, that's just like you. You would," and they were absolutely crazy, you know what I mean? And it was not a safe environment to grow up in. But the thing is I'm glad that they didn't kill us, and I'm glad that we're still here. They kind of did kill us. They killed us in every way except for they didn't take us out of this, we didn't end up in body bags because of them. But really, they did kill us in every other way, right? Because we were killed spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, because of what they did and their garbage, right? And my dad, of course, he's borderline schizophrenic, so paranoia was a huge problem for him. He was very much paranoid. And my mom was manic depressive. And so she wasn't so much paranoid. She kind of was. She was less paranoid than my dad, I'll just say. She was a little paranoid, but a little bit less paranoid than my dad, who was extremely paranoid, right? And he would go through his little stages where he would think that the devil was coming for him and that, he'd have to hide in his room and the demons were coming to get him. And, sometimes he'd run down the freeway naked trying to kill himself and things like this. And my brothers would have to go get him in the middle of the night, Just real crazy stuff, you know what I mean? He was absolutely crazy. He needed help. He needed psychological help as well as meds, you know what I mean? Poor guy. I mean, I have to say poor guy because literally the guy was so sick that he did not really know what he was doing. That's because of the mental illness, you know what I mean? And some people would say, well, he must have known what he was doing. Well, when you're psychotic like that, I don't know. I mean, has anybody really been that mentally ill before that they could say, okay, this is what happens when I go over the edge? I don't know because I'm not a psychiatrist, you know what I mean? All I know is that, this man was completely messed up and he really needed help. He didn't get it. He should have got it. And he trashed his family, right, and himself because he lost out on an awesome relationship with this woman who he could have had a great relationship with. And he lost the love of his children because of the way that he treated her and the way that he treated us. So basically, he's the one that lost. We all lost. I mean, I can't say that we didn't lose. But, he really lost because he wouldn't get help. And even today, he insists that he doesn't need help. But he does. It's just like, but that's what a lot of people who are mentally ill will do. They will say, I don't need any help. I'm fine. And it's because they don't want to face what's going on. And that's absolutely horrible, especially when you have 7 kids, and a wife, I mean, it's not good. Loss of emotional closeness, love, trust, and respect for her partner. So the woman, if she's being abused, she might not, she lose this love and this trust and respect for the partner sometimes. And it says abuse always destroys trust and intimacy. So, I mean, like I know about this firsthand. So, what it's like to lose this love and trust of my parents, as far as being abused in a relationship. No, because really, I've never, I'm a secondhand victim of domestic violence, right? But I know that, there was no closeness. There was no love between my parents. There was no trust and there was no respect because my dad was completely abusive to my mom and then made her become abusive because she went crazy. She absolutely lost her mind. And that's why we're saying, all the kids told her to leave. We were like, you should just leave because she was going crazy. And she was abusing us and she wasn't taking care of herself. And we were like, look, you got to get out of this marriage, man. You got to leave. And she wouldn't leave. And so she stayed in this whole thing her whole life. And even on her deathbed, she was never free from it. A lack of interest in sex with her partner. Abuse always creates emotional distance and estrangement in a relationship. So then she may not, the woman may not want to, have these intimate relations with their partner anymore, their husband or their partner. It's absolutely horrible what that does to people. I know from my mom's life, she was told not to have any more children, and because my dad, after my brother was born, so there's 5 kids, so my dad was, so that's 7 years before I was born, she was told not to have any more children because she could die, because she almost died with my sister, and then there was 2 after. But anyway, there was 3 stillborn children. So my dad, because he would not allow her to be on birth control, which my sister says, well, there's no way, because Mom could have been on birth control if she wanted to be. But for some reason, my mom didn't get on birth control. And so my dad was always forcing himself on her, and then, of course, she'd end up pregnant. And the doctors were like, if she has another baby, she's going to die. And the baby will die and the mother will die, and she's not allowed to have any more children. So my mom would sleep out in the living room, and we'd all kind of take garter from my dad, and it was just absolutely ridiculous that my brothers had to stand watch over my mother just so that my dad wouldn't rape her, but that's what would happen. And it's pathetic. So she didn't want to. Besides that, he was abusive to her and he was raping her. So why would she want to have this closeness with him, right? And my dad just couldn't figure that out, because that's how sick and stupid he was. He was just like, husband and wife should be together. My mom was like, you come near me with that thing and I'll chop it off. She was like very much, trying to save her life, because the doctors said if she ended up pregnant again, that she would die. And it was true, because she was told that she was not able to, she really, honestly, they should have fixed her up and she should have had surgery and been, so that she wouldn't have any more children, because for her health's sake, right? Because she couldn't have any more kids and it was going to kill her. And so, there's my dad forcing himself on her, and what he's expecting her that she would want to still be intimate with him. That's what abuse is, so horrible, and it's like it totally ruins it just destroys the relationship. And people, there's people out there that sit there and think it's perfectly okay to do this stuff to other people. And well, why would they think like that? You know what I mean? Like, why would an abuser think that their partner would still want to have anything to do with them in any way after abusing them? You know what I mean? I just don't get what's going on in their minds. But obviously they're sick, or they wouldn't be doing what they're doing, right? And so it does. It just ruins everything. Isolation, loneliness, feeling disconnected from others. That's, a woman might feel, very much lonely, feeling disconnected from friends, family, right? Withdrawal from friends and family, often encouraged, promoted, or expected by her partner, right? And that's abuse, big time. When a woman's being abused and the partner takes over their whole life, and that's that whole power and control thing, keeping them isolated, keeping them feeling lonely, keeping them, controlling every aspect of their lives, right? And then, of course, the woman's going to feel very much isolated and on their own and without any help and from outside sources, family, friends, neighbors even. You're not even allowed to go out and talk to a neighbor, that sort of thing. My parents didn't do that. My mom was actually not, my dad didn't control my mom like that. She had her friends. She didn't have very many friends, but she had a couple of friends that on the block where we lived, and they would have coffee, and my mom would tell them her sob story, and and that was good for her, right? She needed to have somebody to talk to. And I don't think she would tell them everything, but she would, because the people knew that they were fighting, right? Because my mom, when people are bashing each other over the head with lamps and hitting each other and slapping each other around, there's going to be marks, there's going to be wounds, you know what I mean? So my mom, it's not like she wasn't walking around with no bruises or nothing. My dad was a jerk. And then, of course, my dad would have gashes on his head because my mom would smash him in the head with a pan or whatever. They were two very much violent people. And so the neighbors knew. The neighbors knew what was going on, and the cops were quite often called to the home, and the police. I mean, that's why, everybody knew our situation, right? It's not like they didn't know. But they cared about my parents because my parents were very much, had they not been abusive and had they not had these issues, these mental issues, they were really actually quite interesting people. And a lot of people could look past that, right? Because my parents were from Canada. They were from, they had gone and lived up north in Mecatina, Goose Bay. They had been up in Labrador and all these different places up north there in northern Canada. They lived kind of an interesting life in the military there with my dad. And people found their stories absolutely 100% interesting, you know what I mean? Because, you know, they had something different to offer the people of New Mexico down in the desert there who had never heard of Canada or polar bears or anything else. And so, you know, people liked them. They liked to talk to them, and they, you know, they found them to be funny. And my parents actually, when they were not fighting, you know, and were having, just being normal, decent people, were actually quite interesting and good to be around. It's just not for the like the family wasn't safe. The neighbors were all safe. Everybody was safe on the block. It was the children that were not safe and each other, right? So our family, it's not like my parents were rude to other people or, you know, rude to other people's children. They actually loved other people's children, but they hated their own. I mean, they could literally pick up a neighbor's child and say, "Oh, what a beautiful child." And when that people would leave with their child, you know, then my mom would see me doing something she didn't like and beat me for it, right? And slap me around, curse me, kick me around. We're not talking a spanking, right? We're talking a beating, right? And so, see, she could do that. She could love other people's children, but she had no love in her heart for her own children. And that's where I think a lot of people, you know, they have a hard time with that, because it's like, well, how can my mom love these other children, but she doesn't love me, you know? And that's because I was born out of rape, right? So she couldn't love me. Like, she did love her sons. And she said she felt sorry for my sister. So she never even actually said that she loved my sister, who's 5 years older than me. Because my sister was also born out of rape, right? My mom was not supposed to have any children after my brother Howard was born, and she had 5 more. And 2 of us made it, which was my sister and myself, 5 years apart. And there was 3 that were stillborn. So my mom, it was all out of rape. And my mom, of course, could not love us, right? And I think she wanted to. I think she couldn't bring herself to, because she was so very much loathing and hating what my dad had done and what he had been doing to her, you know, for years, right? And so I was just the representation of that, right? And so she was miserable, right? So that's the thing. She couldn't love me. So, you know, my parents weren't necessarily isolated. They had friends and they had people in their lives that would support them. And that's why I get angry, because I'm like, all these people would support them, and they knew that us kids were walking around with you know, being beaten and tortured, right? They knew this. And they were like, they just felt more sorry for my parents, right? Like, honestly, they would literally, you know, kind of spell it out later on in years, saying, well, we just loved your parents and we felt so sorry for them. And I'm thinking, and you didn't really even consider the abuse that was going on in the home, because they knew the social services was in on it. They knew that we were being checked up on by social services. We had people coming in the house. We had 2 people coming in the house on a regular basis. And when I was a little kid, and I thought, you guys knew that this was going on. You knew that my brother was abused and was actually, my parents were brought up on charges, and you did nothing to look in on the situation to make sure that there was no more abuse going on and that we were not being abused, right? So this is what kind of makes me mad. There was people around that, you know, didn't care that my parents were abusing us and actually just liked my parents and were hugely supportive to my parents. And literally, I told one family says, your parents fight a lot, don't they? And I think I was 10 or 11 years old, and because I was always bruised and beaten. My mom at that point was beating me up quite regularly. And I told them, I said, yes. I said, they do actually. They fight all the time. And they said, well, what is your dad hurting your mom? And I said, yes, he is actually. And I told them about the time I had hit my dad in the head with a bat. I said, well, I hit my dad in the head with a bat one night, because it was a pink plastic bat, but it doesn't matter. It was a bat. And I said, you know, I was trying to protect my mom, so I hit my dad in the head with a bat. And they laughed, and they were like, oh, well. And they just blew it off. And, you know, no, and here I am sitting there all bruised and beat up. And these people today would back my parents before they would back me. These people know, you know, what I'm doing. They know about my book, you know, Life of Death or Redemption. They know that we were abused, and yet they would sit there and they would back my parents. But we just loved your parents, and they were so good. And it's like, no, they weren't. They were horribly abusive people, and they hurt us extremely badly. The sad thing is that that's a lot of the times that's the case. People will back up abusive people, right? And they will, because they have a relationship with the adults, not the children. See? So the parents are obviously, they liked my parents. My mom liked to play cards, and my dad liked to hang out. And, when they weren't abusing each other and abusing us kids, they looked pretty normal. And so that's the whole issue. A lot of people back them up, and that's pretty sad and pathetic, but it does happen. So my parents weren't isolated, so I don't know what that would necessarily be like to have a person who's completely withdrawn and isolated from the family. I just know that it happens, and that from hearing other survivor stories and whatnot, and that if you're going through that, you want to make sure that you get yourself some help, because that's abuse, and it's incredibly damaging, incredibly wrong, and you need to get some help. If you're suffering in that, whether you're a man, a woman, or a child, I don't care. No one deserves to be treated like that. No one. Loss of respect for herself, right? If a woman's being abused, she often asks herself questions like, why do I stay in an abusive relationship, and what's wrong with me that I put up with this kind of treatment? Sometimes I think, people will ask themselves that, even men or and even children sometimes, but they're talking about women here. So she might ask herself, why do I stay in this abusive relationship, And they know that they're getting hurt. They know that there's a possibility that they could be hurt. They know that they're hurting inside, emotionally and psychologically. And if there's physical abuse going on, then they know that they're suffering from these beatings and these bloody battles, but yet they stay in this relationship. And sometimes they sit there, what's wrong with me? They might think they're crazy. And actually they're not. They are being completely overpowered mentally. That's why they stay. Because they're, even if they're not tied to a chair and made to sit there for 10 years, they have been tied to a chair in their mind. And that's that whole mind, game stuff, right? And that's what people do to each other. They will get you to think that you can't leave and that you are stuck in that situation. And that's mainly what the abusers try to do, because they want you to be they want to control the situation. So they want you to be completely under them in every way. So your mind as well. Not just physically. They don't have to tie a woman up to a chair and just make her stay there for 10 years. All they have to do is tie up your mind, chain your mind up, and they've got you. And that's exactly what happened to my mom. And, her mind was chained and bound, right, because my dad had done that to her. And she couldn't think of leaving that relationship, even though she knew she was free to go. We used to actually tell her we'd set her up an apartment. Especially when I got older, I'd be like, Mom, we'll get an apartment. We'll leave Dad, and we'll get an apartment, because I was like the last kid at home, right? And I was about, 15, 16 years old, and she was still beating me up, but I wanted her to be happy, right? Because I was so tired. I thought, hey, if Mom's happy, then I'm happy, right? Because if my mom was happy, then I wasn't getting beat on. So it was always my desire to help my mother, right? Because I thought, hey, if I can get her to a better situation, she'll stop abusing me, right? That was my thought. That was my thought process. So I was like always telling her, we'll get an apartment and I'll work and we'll move out, and she wouldn't go for it. She was bound and chained to that marriage, you know what I mean, because of what my dad had done, and that's absolutely horrific. If you're in that situation, get some help, man. Death of the spirit, having difficulty being spontaneous, playful, and having fun. Abuse always stifles spontaneity, happiness, and joy. And death of the spirit, that's just the whole issue. That's why I called my book A Life of Death and Redemption, because my life was actually death. I was dead, you know what I mean. And when I finally started to fight to live, I started to live, right? But I was dead, and I was, spiritually dead, right? And I know my mom was as well, and most of my family, right? So that's the whole issue. We'll pick up there tomorrow, and then we'll finish off this article. And you can go and take a look at it yourself, www.angerresources.com/impactofabuse.html. And this is from Dave Decker. He's written this article. It's very good, and there's lots more. So we'll take another look at it tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, same time. I sort of bumped my show up a couple hours so I can sleep in. Have a trip coming up to Paso Robles, California with Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. We've been invited out by Benford Stanley, the Director and Producer of The State and Fate of Children. We're going out there to raise our voices. There's 4 of us going. Sandra Potter, Donna Shearer, Elizabeth Brawley, and myself will be out there Friday the 19th through the 23rd presenting, and also just being a part of this Paso Robles Film Festival. So I bumped my shows up a little bit to get some rest, because I've just been exhausted, so I needed to catch up on a little bit of rest. So I'm bumping my shows 2 hours. So thanks, everybody. If I can help you with anything, let me know. I'll be around today, Facebook and Blog Talk Radio. If you need any information or resources that I might have on websites or information for topics such as this, or if you just want to talk, get a hold of me, right? I'm here. And take care of yourselves. Whatever you do, keep reaching out. Never give up. Never, ever give up. I'm so glad to be able to be on this side of it saying, thank God I didn't give up. And I want you to do that as well. So if you're suffering in this, make sure that you don't give up and you just keep walking forward. It doesn't matter, because through that darkness, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and but you have to keep walking it. It's your responsibility to do it. No one can take those footsteps for you. As much as we might want people to do it for us, take away that pain and take away that harsh, the horrible circumstances of being abused and being a victim, very much a victim, and we have to keep walking. And it is literally our responsibility as adult survivors. No one can do it for us. We have to want to reach that door, pull it open with everything that we have, and walk through it and say, I'm going to allow myself to heal. I'm going to allow myself to have a good life. I'm going to allow myself to self-nurture. I literally had to go through this and give myself permission to love myself. You know what I mean? Because I was so far down, and I had been so far down for so long, since the day I was born. And so, we are ultimately, as soon as I realized it was going to have to be me to do it, and realized that no one could do it for me, that was the change. You know what I mean? Because I realized, it is my responsibility. I'm going to have to do this. And then I started working on it. So, and I'm 3.5 years later, I'm sitting on the other side, and I'm so thankful to be here, because I was in hell. So that's why I know what it's like to be on that other side. And I just say, keep reaching out. And never give up, never, right? So take care, everybody, and we'll talk to you tomorrow morning. I'll be back on tonight, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers, with Elizabeth Brawley or just myself. But I'll be talking about the child abuse headlines that are rolling out every day, sadly, that we need to, one day there won't be a headline. They'll never, one day I believe that we can stop child abuse. And you know what? I hope to see it before we lose too many more children, because this is absolutely ridiculous. And if we have to wait till another generation comes around, that's pathetic. So let's do what we can to stop child abuse, right? So have a great day, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.